Hey gents, today we're going to take a look at the new Movement automatic watch, and I know I can hear you guys screaming and typing through the screen, Seiko 5, Timex Marlin, Orient Bambino. That's all good. I want to give this watch a little bit of the time today and talk about the reason that it is so significant. So the Arc Automatic is the new line from Movement, which takes their Bauhaus-like design, very minimalist, very simplistic, takes their giant marketing muscle, which was recently acquired by Invicta for $200 million, and then throws a Miyota movement into there, and it retails for $300. If you want to see some alternatives, I'll link to a video where I talk about those, and that's really all I'm going to talk about in the alternative space. For this watch in particular, at $300, let's talk about why it's so significant. Movement has turned on a generation of people to watches that never would have previously been interested in watches. I've talked about it before. Daniel Wellington got me into watches. Daniel Wellington watches, I think, have their prices gone up because some of their watches are well over $200 for a quartz minimalist watch, and so that makes this watch at $300 almost look okay. When I saw this watch announced, the watch world appropriately burst out into flames, talking about how it was a ripoff, how, it seems like no matter what Movement did, people would have been angry about it. I saw some comments on them naming it the Ivory Oak, which is tongue-in-cheek, Royal Oak, but really is that much different than the model that Seiko has called a Marine Master, Seamaster. And then other people say that the watch is overpriced for what you're getting, but if you're going to blame a watch company for having high margins, why aren't people more angry about the luxury space? Luxury space, different thing. They innovate, R&D, all that sort of stuff. But Movement very well is the gateway drug into those luxury watch brands. And so that is why I believe this is a very significant watch. So even though the watch has 4 models right now, I'm sure they will expand. Movement is now owned by Invicta, which is one of the largest conglomerates of, people would lovingly refer to them as shitter watches, but these are going to be everywhere. And if this is the watch that gets people into watchmaking and diving into that world, then we should thank Movement for making watches great again. I think there's a huge spike in the vintage world. If you look at myself or Teddy Baldessar, some of these guys that are coming up now just getting into watches, this was their gateway drug. And so for Movement to have an offering within their line which gets people an automatic mechanical movement and gets them familiar with the idea behind there being a tiny machine that you can power with your body, I think is super exciting, and it's worth celebrating to a degree. So let's take a look at the details on this watch. This is a hardened K1 crystal with stainless steel design. It's 41 millimeters, so it's not terribly big, not too small, and it does have this domed crystal, which reminds me a lot of the models that are just coming out now with the Timex Marlin. That Timex Marlin, the Todd Snyder one, the black one, whew, I love that design. But that's a great example where you can get that in a mechanical or automatic watch. It is a slightly lower price, and it has the Timex heritage to it, and I hope that that watch is waking people up to more of this, and you can see how this wears on the wrist right here. And I constantly see references to stories where people will be out and they have their Speedmaster on, or they have their Datejust on, and a person will come up and say to someone they're with, "Oh, I love your watch," and it's a Movement watch, or it's a Daniel Wellington watch. And so there is this level of brand equity that Movement has built, which is why they were acquired for $200 million. I don't see anybody complaining on the internet about how Movement has overpriced shitter watches, selling companies for $200 million. I just don't. And I'd be really curious over time if this watch becomes a larger portion of their business as people understand the Movement brand and then move into understanding that a mechanical watch is superior in some ways to a quartz watch. It's not more accurate, but it does have that mechanical component, which gives it a little bit more, I like to say, romance. So yes, this is a Miyota movement, which is what you see from a lot of brands at this price point. The crown moves pretty well here. It has a very readable date window in the middle and very subtle branding. It's not a giant movement. It has a date window down in the center, says automatic right above, reminds me a lot of that Swissmatic Tissot, and then has very subtle Movement logo on the top. It's not really in your face that this is a Movement watch, and in fact, I'd probably mistake it for some of the more modern Tissot models that I've been checking out. 5 ATM water resistance, so you don't really want to get this thing wet. 20 millimeter lugs, so pretty standard lug size in case you want to swap out this genuine leather strap, but it does wear pretty well because of the angled lugs right here, and so even on my 6¼ inch wrist, not too bad. There is a pretty well decorated 21 jewel Miyota movement. They have the Movement logo stamped on there, designed in Los Angeles, and I love that you can see the heartbeat of this thing through the display case back. And it keeps me constantly wondering why Rolex doesn't do display case backs, because even though by most accounts their movements are hideous because they are really designed to be hard-working tool watches, I think people want to see it. I love flipping over my Seamaster and seeing the decorated movement under the sapphire caseback. And so that is the Movement Automatic watch. Like I said, I'll put links to that video where I talk about some alternatives if you're interested. But if you like the Movement design, if you like the Movement brand, which based on how many of those watches I see in the wild, I think this is going to be pretty big. And if this watch isn't for you, there are thousands of Swiss-made brands alone that are trying to make great watches at great prices. And that's the kind of stuff I'm also covering on the channel. So whether it's the $300 automatic Movement watch, I did the Reverie GT recently, Martinero, trying to cover what aren't the bottom end of the watch group, but more that middle tier before you get up into the Oris and some of that vintage stuff. But I think we're just at a really cool time for retail in general, but watches in particular are super exciting. And so if you want to check out Movement, I'll put links below so you can check them out. Always appreciate any questions and comments down below. You can also reach out at _Kavalier on Twitter and Instagram. Until next time, gents, this is the Kavalier.